Thank you for tuning into episode 9 of Podcast Sokol with Danny de la Mora. For this episode, my special guest is attorney Frank Triana. He is my boss. I work for him, and I asked him if he could do this for me. He agreed. So, without any further delay, I bring you guys episode 9 of Podcast Sokol with Danny de la Mora. You've been my boss for almost 2 years now, and of course there's maybe stuff about you coming up as an attorney that I don't know about that maybe would be a great thing to talk about. Like, were you from here, or are you from here originally?
Paso?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. So
Is this your stuff or school?
no, this is
that
my
they
stuff.
loan you?
No, this is
Okay.
mine. Yeah, this is mine.
Okay.
Yeah. So, where did you go to school for studying law?
Well, I went to law school in Lubbock, Texas Tech.
Oh, okay.
That's the only law school in Lubbock. Yeah.
Oh, okay. What made you say, "Oh, okay, I want to be an attorney"?
Of course, I go way back when there was a lawyer program on TV called Perry Mason, and I always found that interesting. But I just never thought that was a possibility. I went through high school, and when I decided to go to college, and I enrolled at UTEP, and it never occurred to me that I could go to law school.
Right.
And so I had to figure on, well, what can I get a degree in that I can find some work, because of my limitations with my size, and I'm not going to be out there digging ditches
Right.
and so all I could think about was some type of business, and then I thought, maybe accounting, and be an accountant, and that just led me to take courses at UTEP that dealt with accounting.
Right.
And I got into my sophomore year taking advanced accounting, and then it just gradually it dawned on me that I guess I'm going to try to avoid using crude words, but
You can.
no, it just occurred to me that this is something I really don't want to do. This is just basically just way too boring.
Right. Because it deals with a lot of numbers.
It's basically numbers, ratios, graphs, and it was just something I found just basically boring. And so then I just had to just change my focus on I'm gonna give it a shot.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna give it a shot to go to law school.
Oh, okay. So when you first became a lawyer, did you start practicing here in El Paso first, or did you practice elsewhere first?
When I went to law school and I finished my 3 years, and I took the bar exam while I was still in Lubbock, and there were a lot of things open to lawyers, well, soon to be lawyers, about what they could do. They could go back home or apply for jobs at other law firms or government places. But there was a representative from some foundation out of Washington, D.C. that offered fellowships, which was a funded job, but to work for poor people.
Right.
A legal aid office. And they had places around the country, and they had an opening in Tucson, Arizona. And this would be for 2 years. And they would pay your salary, which was a decent wage. It was enough to make a car payment, make rent payment, and buy food and stuff. And so that's why I went for 2 years. I was in Tucson, Arizona.
Did you have to take the bar in Arizona?
I did. I didn't have to,
Uh-huh.
but I did, and I probably was too overconfident. I didn't study
Oh.
for the bar exam in Arizona. I didn't pass it because I thought I had enough basic information because I just the year before I had taken the bar exam in Texas. So the legal aid office asked me to uh, to take the bar exam, but they didn't insist upon it because what they had me do was immigration work, which is a federal type work that all I needed was to be licensed in one state.
Oh.
And by then I had been licensed in Texas.
When was this, more or less?
Okay, well, I took the bar during the summer of 77. And then I got my license in November of 77. So by then I began working in Tucson like in, must have been like September of 77.
Oh, okay.
And so they didn't have any lawyer working to defend uh, clients that had immigration problems.
So,
And
looking back, late 70s, early 80s, how different was immigration law in general to what it is today?
this was back in 77. The laws changed back then compared to now.
Mm-hmm.
Back then, there was more compassion in in the immigration laws as far as uh, allowing immigrants who had minor criminal problems to still keep their resident status. And the laws changed during the 90s, and which made it more difficult for people to qualify. It was basically if you got into almost any kind of trouble, then you were going to be apprehended and then deported, removed.
Yeah, because they get harder. Well, I think immigration laws are a little hard today in general. I can't imagine how they were back there, but I know Arizona has had some of the strictest immigration laws when it comes down to people that are not from the U.S.
Well, immigration law is federal,
Right.
which means it's exactly the same in every single state. So, I mean, just because I was in Arizona didn't mean that it was more strict there than in Texas or New Mexico. Federal law is the same in every state. Because I did, after I left Tucson, I came back to El Paso in late 79, and I did some immigration work in El Paso, but the law was exactly the same. And I did do some immigration work when I came back to El Paso, but the law was still exactly the same as it was from my practice in Tucson.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because I've heard, of course, we see a lot. Well, in the news, you see how I believe border patrol agents in Arizona have they have authority to pull people over and request immigration documentation such as passports. And I know that's a difference that we don't see here because I haven't really stumbled upon that.
That's basically a policy by local authorities. Like in Arizona, there was a sheriff of Maricopa, that's around Phoenix.
Right.
That sheriff was basically known for being anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican, anti-brown people.
Right.
And so he authorized his deputies, if you see anybody that looks like they're not Americans, then stop them and find out if they have papers. And like in El Paso, every sheriff we've had don't do that. They don't have a local policy to stop people that may look Hispanic, just because they look Hispanic,
Right.
or because of the color of their skin, or maybe because they hear them talk Spanish, to automatically go stop them and inquire about their citizenship status.
Right.
But that's normally that's a local government police policy on whether or not they do that.
Right.
And but Arizona is considered more strict law enforcement
Right.
and underlying, but just anti-immigrant, anti-Mexican, and so they're a little harder on their outlook and how they really treat people who are not white.
Right. Yeah, and it's a weird perspective to see it from their perspective, of course, because we don't see that too much here in El Paso. We are a very well. We do have a lot of Mexican heritage, of course, because Mexico's literally a few feet away from us. But I guess we're more tolerant when it comes to more of that. Even though we have ports of entry here in El Paso, and well, I know there are more ports of entry in Texas, but here in El Paso, particularly, it's a unique city comparing them to other cities like in Arizona or even maybe Brownsville and Southeast Texas. But well, so you've been an attorney for about 40 years, I want to say, right? I don't know.
Plus,
40 plus years.
yes.
How many? Well, after you, when did you come back from Arizona? When did you start practicing in El Paso?
Okay, well, I came back in late '77. uh, I came back in late '77. I practiced in here up until early 1980, and then I moved with another attorney. We moved in 1980, early 1980, to Odessa. Oil was booming back then, and uh, there was good legal work, what they called when people get injured on the job, because of course, being oil related, there's always oil related type injuries.
Right.
And they had a workers' comp law at that time where it was profitable for attorneys to represent injured oil field workers. But then Texas changed the workers' comp law to eliminate what attorneys were doing, getting so much money from companies. And so, but I was there in Odessa from 80 to like summer of 82. And I did mostly criminal work, a little bit of immigration work, but mostly criminal work and the workers' comp uh, type of cases. And I really didn't care to live in Odessa. Uh, and a lady I had met when I was in Tucson, who was really involved in immigration work, she moved to San Diego, California, and was starting an immigration consulting business and wanted an attorney to help supervise when her clients needed representation in front of an immigration court. And so she asked me to move and that she would pay me a retainer to work on her immigration court cases. And so I picked up in the summer of 1982.
Oh.
And I moved to San Diego. And because I was licensed in one state and was doing exclusive federal work, and I advertised myself as an immigration lawyer. And so I had an office in it's a small town between San Diego and the border. It's called Chula Vista, California, and I opened up an office there in Chula Vista, and worked there from 1982 until late 1988.
After that, did you come back to El Paso?
And I came back to El Paso.
Okay. How come you came back to El Paso? Because
My
California.
father, I know, California. I mean, that's a beautiful.
Yeah.
That's a very beautiful part of the country, but it's very expensive,
Yes.
and lots of times feelings of home, and really wanting to come back home. Uh, my brothers had all moved out of town, and the only person living in El Paso was my dad, and he was getting up in age. He was all by himself, and so a combination of wanting to go back home, wanting to get into the regular practice of law, not just exclusively doing immigration work, because that can be very frustrating. Very, uh, you feel so you feel so helpless sometimes because you want to help your client, but then there's just no remedy available to them, and they end up getting, being deported, and you see families that are split apart, and
Right.
there's a lot of heartache, when you do immigration work. But I came back mainly because, I wanted to be close to my dad again. He was by himself. Wanted to get back to the regular practice of law, and just be back home.
Right. No, and I've heard a lot of people in different areas, different fields of work, where they leave El Paso. They'll either go to Austin or Houston here in the state, either to go to college or something, and they usually always say, "Well, I do miss being in El Paso. I do miss El Paso." It's something you don't realize until you leave El Paso, where okay, I miss being home. I miss El Paso, and I guess because it's again so different. It's such a different city, such a unique city with its own taste, its own culture. That I don't know. I guess sometimes you feel this nostalgia because when I do travel, sometimes I kind of feel like that. Not all the time, because when I'm traveling, I'm keeping in mind, well, I'm not going to be in El Paso for maybe a week. But within that week, I do start thinking, man, I kind of want to be back home right now. So I don't know if it's something that El Paso is El Paso something. Would you consider El Paso something like that for you? Like,
I don't know. I want to say I don't think so. It's only because El Paso happens to be where I'm from.
right,
I guess I could have grown up in Odessa, as to me as it's an kind of an ugly town. It's it's flat, nothing but the rocking horses pumping oil out of the ground, and there's a smell over there. But I mean, for people, sometimes home is home, even though it may not be appealing to one person. But I mean, El Paso is my home, so.
right. True, and that's very true because there's also a lot of people that say, well, no, there's nothing to do in El Paso. El Paso's a boring city. I've had that. I've been on that side as well. I've said sometimes before, oh, well, El Paso, there's really not much to do. But then again, I am from here. I've been here most of my life, so it's easy for me to say that. And in contrast to my friends that I have a friend who's from Florida who tells me, no, man, El Paso is great. I love El Paso. There's so much. There's so many things to do. It's just that people sometimes don't look for things to do. So people close their minds and say, no, there's nothing to do here. There's more things to do elsewhere. But now that you mention Odessa, because I've been to Odessa and Midland for work as well. You're right. It is kind of boring there because there's really nothing to do like at all other than work and sleep. At least that's how it was for me. That was my experience there. And you come back to El Paso, you come to work, and you leave work and you can at least go home, relax with your friends or go out with your friends, do something, do some sort of activity. Um, did you ever find yourself in that situation with El Paso? Where, no, well, I have other things in El Paso that may be better for me to do in El Paso than elsewhere.
Uh, being that I lived in San Diego for 6 years, and there's there's obviously a lot more to do
Right.
in the San Diego area, and there's a lot of places not too far that you can travel to that just are scenically just beautiful, especially with the beach. But and so technically there could be not a whole lot of comparison between Southern California and El Paso, but just the notion of uh, in your brain and your heart, there's what's home to you,
Right.
and uh, that was oddly enough. I mean, that was what compelled me to come back.
Oh, okay. I have a question for you. So you've been practicing for over 40 years. Can you tell me what the weirdest or the most strange case you dealt with, whether it's criminal, immigration? What would be your highlight for the weirdest or just the strangest overall case in general of your law career?
Ah, I mean, I can pick one out, which was uh, an immigration case that I handled in California. And the lady who started that immigration business, uh, who enticed me, who prompted me to move to to California, led like a double life. Besides, she's passed away now, so I think I can talk about it. But
Mm.
she she was she went undercover for DEA
Oh, really?
in and because she met a lot of drug people.
Right.
A lot of them needed help with family members, and but she would work with uh, DEA and a few other uh, federal law enforcement, and she had another gentleman who went for immigration assistance uh, through her business, that he got involved working with her
Mm-hmm.
uh, to trap some bad narco dudes
Oh.
there. And then it came time to try to fix his papers. And there was a formal type of immigration application that you have to written application and file it with the court. And I had to get the judge and the government prosecutors to agree to close the hearing, because I had to have like some federal agents come in to testify
Mm-hmm.
about his cooperation. And it was that testimony from
Just the whole process in general was just strange.
it was odd, because it was so unusual for that type of thing to happen.
Mm-hmm.
and and solely because of those federal agents, the guy was able to get a green card,
Oh,
get
okay.
a resident passport, uh, because of that. So immigration wise, that was probably the most unusual case.
Right.
Uh,
Because when I first became a paralegal, I started doing immigration work. It wasn't until I transferred to the third attorney I started working for that I started getting involved into criminal law, and not just criminal law, family law, and what we currently do now. And I remember always being finding the murder cases appealing. Um, do you like doing those?
when I was in the after I came to El Paso back in late '88, I worked for the district attorney's office for like 2.5 years, and I sat with a couple of the more experienced prosecutors on a couple murder cases. And I mean, they're pretty special type of cases, not because you're dealing with uh, a family member who's dead,
Mm-hmm.
but just sometimes with an accused, a defendant, who you have to prove he did it.
Right.
And just the type of evidence that you see in different murder cases that are, pretty ugly, especially when it involves a child. And but I mean, it's just something when you've decided to become a lawyer, you you have it inside you that you separate your personal feelings from your obligation and your duty
Right.
to legally either represent the state, or when you no longer work for the state and you go into private practice.
Right.
And when I went into private practice, I helped a couple lawyers work on defending murder cases, and it's just a matter of being prepared, like for anything.
Yeah, because if you think about it, sometimes I do go home and I think about the cases. I am like that. Like I see whether it's a criminal case involving theft or drugs, but the ones that kind of mostly get to me are the family violence ones. Because you see a lot of things in there, and of course, um, we work we of course work directly with the attorneys, so we're exposed to that. But how do you personally approach that? Because for me personally, when I see those things, I'm like, damn, I can't believe what I'm reading. Sometimes I don't know if to believe it or not, because of course you have to hear both sides of the story, like you guys do in court. But when I first read the first reports and I read into the case, um, you hear or you read the testimonies, you see either videos or pictures on the portal. Um, it's sometimes hard to grasp the what people do, the things that people do to other people, the things that they're willing to do to other people. I just find that incredible, and not always in a good way. Because I do go home and I think about it, and I think about my family. I think, like, we're a family, like, these people that get appointed to us also have a family like I do. They live in El Paso like I do, but they make these decisions. How do you approach that yourself when you go home?
I learned a long time ago to not let it affect me emotionally. As I mean, like you're saying, you deal with cases where there are victims, sometimes who are just uh, sometimes it's savagely beaten, uh, and and then you're defending the person who's accused of doing that.
Right, and you have to prove that they didn't do it, right?
And no, I don't have to prove that they didn't do it. I have to try to uh, find holes in the state's case that will maybe cause a jury not not to find him guilty. And sometimes, uh, if I get a not guilty verdict, uh, I'll go talk with the jury, and a lot of them will tell me that we had a doubt because the standard is
With beyond reasonable
beyond a
doubt.
reasonable doubt. Like if they have, and the defense tries to convince them that there's a reasonable doubt that he did it, and a lot of jurors will tell me, oh, we kind of think he did it, but you know, based on everything that this prosecutor showed to us and everything you were telling us, we had a doubt. We had a doubt. But that doesn't mean they think he's innocent.
Right.
It's just that they don't think the state fully met their burden
Right.
of proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. And that's all a defense attorney can do, is not not to bring in evidence to show he's innocent, but just to fight the state's case,
Right.
to try to show that they haven't met their burden, that there is a doubt, and it's a reasonable doubt. So you have a duty not to find him guilty. And so it's tough. I mean, it's tough because lots of times I know my client is guilty, but at the same time, my job is to try to fight the state's case so that they can't prove it.
Right. Mr. Triana, well, I want to thank you for your time today. I have one last question for you. What's your favorite song?
Song?
Right. Yeah.
Oh gosh, there's so many songs I like. There's several. I mean, I grew up loving almost all of the Beatles music. And
I tell all my guests that we all change favorite song from time to time. So if you were to choose one favorite song right now, which one would it be?
gosh, because there are some groups that I can't remember their name. Uh,
you can pick a Beatles song too.
I also liked Frank Sinatra, and there was one song I always liked for him. It was called "Strangers in the Night."
Okay.
So, since you're forcing me to
That will be
give
your
you a
third
song